Good evening. You're watching the World Panorama, a weekly roundup of all the big international news. With me, Ishan Russell. And in terms of what happened in the world this week, well, here are the headlines. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump frontrunners for nominations for the U.S. presidential race after some big wins in some key states. But uncertainty persists in the Republican camp over Trump's acceptability in the Republican establishment. UN-mediated peace talks on Syria are underway, though there are deep divisions between various players in the conflict. Russia announces a partial troop pullout, and common fight against the Islamic State raises some hopes. Thin Kyaw elected as Myanmar's first civilian president in over half a century, with Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi to be the self-declared power center, handling the military, the economy and humanitarian crises, the immediate challenges. And Kurdish terrorist strike in Ankara in Turkey, the third big terror attack in the country since October. President Erdogan vows a bigger crackdown than ever. Our top story this week, the race for the U.S. presidential nomination. Now, Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton emerged from Titanic Tuesday this week as their respective parties' clear frontrunners. Clinton, it seems, is virtually through, but in the Republican camp, it's still unclear whether Trump has, with all the controversy that he's generated, can unite his party behind him in time for the convention in July.
Well, I'll tell you.
The big horses in the nominations races so far. Donald Trump won in 3 of the 5. Illinois, North Carolina and crucial winner-takes-all state Florida gave him the thumbs up. But he lost in Ohio to Governor John Kasich. For Clinton, it's a cleaner sweep. Runaway wins in Florida, North Carolina and Ohio, victories in Missouri and Illinois too, making her lead virtually unassailable. The former Secretary of State has got nearly double the number of delegates as Sanders. To boot, she has the support of President Obama and other bigwigs in the Democrat camp. Already, she's in final race mode.
Well, I'll tell you, this is another Super Tuesday for our campaign. Thank you, Florida. Thank you, North Carolina. Thank you, Ohio. Our commander-in-chief has to be able to defend our country, not embarrass it. Engage our allies, not alienate them. Defeat our adversaries, not embolden them. When we hear a candidate for president call for rounding up 12 million immigrants, banning all Muslims from entering the United States, when he embraces torture, that doesn't make him strong, it makes him wrong.
Not so outright for maverick Donald Trump, though he is in the lead. Tuesday's primaries leave Trump with 640 delegates against 405 for his closest rival, Ted Cruz, and 138 for Ohio's John Kasich. Trump needs 1,237 to win the nomination. Difficult, but not impossible. But already top Republican power brokers who see Trump as an outsider are looking at a so-called brokered convention, which can occur if no candidate wins a majority of delegates.
They were resounding victories for both Clinton and Trump, no matter how you look at it. I also think that the results in Ohio are such that this race will go on. It creates some momentum for Governor Kasich moving forward, and that might be enough to prevent Trump from getting the requisite number of delegates to really sew this up before the convention. So we very well might be looking at a contested convention on the Republican side in Cleveland.
Besides, for Trump, it's not just about numbers. Concerns in the Republican establishment on his eccentricities means it could still be an open race till the end. There can be no denying he does raise a degree of worry. On the campaign trail, Trump has advocated killing the families of terrorists and invading Syria to eradicate the so-called Islamic State group and appropriate its oil. Watchers say his ban on all Muslim travel to the US would be a potent recruitment tool for jihadi groups. Trump calls for a big wall to be built on the US-Mexico border to keep out illegal immigrants. He's been exceptionally hostile towards free trade, including notably NAFTA, and has repeatedly labeled China as a currency manipulator. All of this and a victory in the all-crucial Ohio state primary keep John Kasich in the running, though he trails to both Trump and Ted Cruz, hopeful of emerging the establishment candidate in the end.
First of all, you know, when you're in the arena and you are struggling and you leave your family to go out on the campaign trail and deliver a message to America because you believe that you are the best qualified person to be president of the United States, and you put it all on the line, and your family puts it all on the line.
One more Republican hopeful, Marco Rubio, pulled out this week after he lost his home state, Florida, which now leaves 3 in the Republican nomination race. Numbers and delegates 1 apart, everything suggests this one could go down to the wire. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
And to help us understand this complicated American presidential nomination race, we are joined by Foreign Affairs Editor at the Hindustan Times, Pramit Chaudhuri. Thanks very much for coming in, Pramit. Just for our understanding over here, it's a really complicated process. So in terms of Trump might have reached the halfway mark in terms of getting the number of delegates that are required to secure the nomination from the Republican Party, but it's still a long way to go, isn't it?
Absolutely. Because the next set of states that go to the polls will be in the North and the West, areas where traditionally Trump has not done very well. Second, Trump has been only winning about 35% of the vote in the primary so far, which isn't really that much. He's only been lucky is because there's been 16 other candidates that have fractured the remaining 65% of the vote. Now there's only 2 candidates.
Right.
And so Kasich, for example, should now pick up the Rubio vote, the Bush vote, although the mainstream vote will go his way. Some of the Carson vote will head towards Cruz, who is the evangelical candidate. So the net result now, his 35% is effectively going to be matched or could potentially be beaten by one of the other 2 candidates. It's a lot more difficult for him now in the coming months.
All right, and as I was saying, by the time the Republican convention comes around, in case those 1,227, if I'm not mistaken, that number is not hit by Trump, then who goes through, who becomes the presidential nominee from the Republican side?
Yeah, so that's when you get a brokered convention, which just means that the convention, at the time the convention opens, there is nobody who has a pledged number of candidates. It's over 50%. The last time that happened was 1976, Gerald Ford versus Ronald Reagan, in which Ford eventually won. And the result is that the thing about brokered conventions, and the rules get a little shady because some delegates, the state party units of the Republican Party, then become very powerful. They can tell delegates who, for example, if 60% of the delegates were theoretically pledged to Trump on the basis of his win in the primary, they could declare them free. In other words, you can choose as you wish. It's like having a party declaring we have no whip in Parliament. You can vote freely as you consciously decide. And then the more complicated process, which has not happened since 1948, is what is called multiple ballots. In other words, they keep voting again and again and again, and each candidate drops out and declares for another candidate, or votes begin to switch back and forth as various state units decide to go. There, the political establishment, therefore, then starts to play a role because a lot of the people on the grassroots will basically ask the national executive of the party, what do we do? That hasn't happened since 1948. And at that point, again, anybody could win. But again, I would expect that Trump would then be at a disadvantage given the deep dislike that exists within the Republican Party leadership for him.
All right, and that's my next question. As far as Trump's acceptance in the Republican Party, because he was almost considered a rank outsider in the Republican ranks, and now he's come in and he's leading, and he's got secured half the nominations that are required, half the delegates that are required. So, in terms of within the party, would there be a larger game afoot now? There are people who are dropping out. Kasich, as you're saying, could perhaps provide a late surge.
Well, what is happening, yes, the establishment is very clearly now turning, has always been unhappy with Trump because, as you mentioned, he's not a member of the party's political establishment. He's never held a political office in his life. He suddenly came out of the blue and then suddenly began to sweep. The party's preferred candidate would probably have been Jeb Bush, the party leadership. And you can see now Mitt Romney, all of these fellows, one by one, coming out and attacking him and basically saying that this man is going to be a problem for the party, because he's not really part of the party at all. He's just an outsider who's interloped in. So there are three reasons why they don't like him. One, as I've mentioned, he's not part of the party system in the first place. He has no history with the Republican Party. Second, what are called match-up polls. In other words, polls that when voters are already asked if by chance it's Hillary versus Trump, it's Hillary versus this Rubio or somebody, who would you vote for? All of them show that Hillary is a very weak candidate, in fact, against all of the mainstream Republican candidates. Against Kasich, for example, she trails by on average 8 percentage points. The only candidate she easily defeats is Trump.
Okay.
So the Republican Party is saying, we can easily win this presidency. Any one of our candidates can win. The only one who can't is Trump, and this is not the one we want.
All right. Anybody else other than Trump? A very quick word on Hillary and the fact that she seems to be at least heading towards securing that Democratic nomination.
Yeah, she's had a hard run with Sanders, and it's very clear that there's, between the youth and white workers, working class, she's been struggling. Luckily for her, the minorities, blacks and Hispanics, have stood by her.
But is that because of Trump on the other side making them feel
No,
insecure?
she's always had a long relationship with him. Even against Obama, the Hispanic vote never defected.
Okay.
And Obama has effectively endorsed her, and the African-American vote will go wherever Obama tells them to. So but her weakness is going to be, one, she has a potential big FBI indictment that could blow up anytime in the next couple of months. Obama makes the call on that. And if he decides to protect his legacy rather than her, then that could obviously destroy her. And Sanders is going to go all the way to the end of the convention, even though he'll lose. But he will force her to turn left. Okay. Her politics will have to go left-wing to absorb his support base and his pressure. The problem for her then is she goes too far left. Right. The moderate vote in America will then start to swing against her.
Okay. So that really leaves it all open as of now.
Absolutely.
I mean, the process is a long drawn process and will continue, and we'll, of course, invite you back to discuss this a little further. Thanks very much, Pramit, for coming in for now and helping us understand this.
Thank you.
All right, on that note, we'll slip into a quick break, but as we go, we'll tell you about this. The world's first self-lacing sneaker is a reality. Released ahead of the Rio Olympics in August, soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo will be testing the inaugural pair. Here's that and much more to come on the other side. Welcome back. You're watching the World Panorama. Now, United Nations mediated Syria peace talks got underway in Geneva this week, hoping to hammer out a political track to end the prolonged conflict. Initially expected to fail, there is some momentum now, with Russia announcing a troop pullout, the relative success of the ceasefire, and signs of US-Russia diplomatic cooperation. The deep divisions between the Syrian government and various opposition groups do stand out.
They have been termed the proximity talks, a UN effort to bring all the conflicting parties on Syria's future to a state of willingness to talk. So far, in the revived effort at Geneva, UN Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, has been shuttling between the sides, communicating their different stands on how to end the 5-year conflict. Look at it one way. There is some exchange of views. At another level, the boundaries are big indeed.
قضية الشكل والموضوع There's not always a clear distinction and firm line between form and substance. We did enter into substantive discussions as we received some clarification on the paper submitted by the government of Syria. So substantive discussions have started. The form is still something we are discussing. We are moving in parallel on both sides. The interpretations of form and substance differ from one side to another.
A major sticking point is the future of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The main opposition umbrella group, High Negotiations Committee, the HNC, insists that Assad step down before any period of transition. Differences persist too over the release of political detainees and distributing humanitarian aid. Even at the outset, composition of delegations is a conflict area. The two sides have not agreed to meet face-to-face just yet, with the Syrian government outrightly rejecting talks with the High Negotiations Committee, dismissing the umbrella group as a band of terrorists.
No one can monopolize the opposition. We would not have talks with only one opposition group, but with all opposition delegations. As the Syrian government delegation, we do not want to have direct talks with terrorists. Most members of the Saudi-backed delegation are terrorists. They bomb embassies, massacre engineering students, and kill the innocent.
Certainly a big leg up, though, at the beginning of this round in Geneva was Russia's surprise announcement of partial troop withdrawal. Russian forces had bolstered President Assad's attacks on opposition forces. The UN envoy, as well as several nations, lauded the move as significant and providing key momentum. Some interpret Russia saying the objectives of its military mission had been achieved as a push towards peace. Others say it is more of a wait-and-watch measure, but a key landmark nonetheless.
With the cessation of hostilities largely holding, Russia's announcement yesterday that it will remove half of its forces immediately and more perhaps from Syria, and with the political negotiations reconvening this week in Geneva, we have reached a very important phase in this process.
The complicated Syria crisis has other voices too. The Kurds calling for federal region in northern Syria, Moscow-backed rebels being brought in as a concession to Russia, the Hezbollah and other elements. Activists agree, however, that these talks, the outcome of diplomatic cooperation between the US and Russia, threw up the biggest peace possibility for Syria yet.
Let me assure you, there is a real Russian who will continue to ensure the success of these negotiations and to launch a political process. Adding to this, there is the will of US President Barack Obama to ensure the success of these negotiations. We are now in a gold period, a historic opportunity for the success of these negotiations before the elections of a new president of the United States.
The last 5 years of this conflict have had huge implications for global security, even besides the killing of more than 250,000 people and displacing half of Syria's population. A refugee crisis in neighboring countries in Europe, the rise of Islamic State terror group are perhaps the darkest outcomes. The Geneva meet goes on till 24th of March. Can it at least throw up a glimmer of light to the road ahead? Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
A Kurdish militant group has claimed responsibility for the deadly terror attack in the Turkish capital Ankara on the 13th of March. 37 people were killed and dozens injured in the blast, termed by the terror group TAK as revenge for Turkey's military operations in the mainly Kurdish southeast. The TAK is an offshoot of the banned Kurdistan Workers' Party PKK. As the probe continues, at least 47 suspects have been detained in anti-terror operations across Turkey. President Erdogan has vowed a harsh crackdown on any terror-related activity in the country. In a further development, Germany closed its embassy in Ankara and its consulate and a school in Istanbul, saying that there were concrete indications that terrorist attacks were being prepared against German facilities in Turkey. Now, Myanmar this week elected its first civilian president in more than half a century. As expected, Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi's close confidant, Tin Kyaw, won the landmark presidential vote on Tuesday. Suu Kyi has made it clear that she will control the new government by proxy, even though she can't be president. Though overcoming strong constitutional powers still held by the military remains a sizable challenge ahead.
The man of the moment in Myanmar. Tin Kyaw is the country's first civilian, first democratically elected president in over 50 years. The National League for Democracy, with a powerful majority in parliament, ensured Aung San Suu Kyi's hand-picked nominee was elected. Even in his first reaction to the speech, Kyaw expressed his loyalty to Aung San Suu Kyi.
Today's result is because of the love of the people for her. It is the victory of my sister Aung San Suu Kyi and the people.
70-year-old Tin Kyaw is said to be a soft-spoken intellectual who attended university in the UK. He has a reputation for honesty and loyalty. Kyaw's choice itself arises from his long-time loyalty to democracy icon Aung San Suu Kyi. He played a senior role at the charity founded in honor of Aung San Suu Kyi's late mother and has been frequently seen at the NLD leader's side. Kyaw's party colleagues acknowledge that he is the right man for the job.
At this time, our country needs a person who really can work and negotiate among the different groups. We are very lucky that we got someone who has that skill. He is very smart.
There can be no mistaking who remains at the helm of affairs in Myanmar, having openly voiced as much. The inflexibility of the army in not allowing Aung San Suu Kyi to take the presidentship despite a huge election mandate has set the tone for what looks likely to be a period of confrontation between them and the newly elected Democrats. And there's every expectation of tensions lingering into at least the near future, with the army not budging from red lines it put in the constitution. The 2008 constitution will be the main limit on Suu Kyi's power. It ensures the military retains its political role. The key security ministries, Home, Defense and Border Affairs, are appointed not by the president but by the army commander-in-chief. A quarter of the seats in parliament are also reserved for soldiers. That is not enough for them to block legislation, but sufficient to scupper any attempts to amend their constitution. Victories aside, the new government faces an uphill task on the development and economy front. Repairing human rights situations like those of the Rohingya Muslims of Rakhine State will be a key task. Bringing laws in line with international obligations is at the center of it.
The arrival of this new government is an opportunity to break the tragic status quo situation of the Rakhine State. I am fully aware of the complexity of the issues at stake and the severe underdevelopment affecting both communities in the state. But development efforts alone will not be enough. Concrete actions must be taken rapidly to address the structural dimensions that lead to the serious human rights concerns on the ground.
Tin Kyaw replaces Thein Sein, who will step down at the end of the month after 5 years of army-backed rule. These are historic times in Myanmar, a new government, a new ideology in place. But as commentators say, it's also a landmark crossroads, and steps taken now will determine the nature of the road ahead. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Let's now take a look at some other big stories that made headlines across the world this week in our next segment, Globe Watch.
119 civilians were killed and dozens injured in Hajj city of Yemen as the US-backed Saudi Arabia-led coalition carried out airstrikes against Shia Houthi rebels on Tuesday. At least 22 of the killed were children. This is one of the highest death toll since the Saudi-led coalition launched a bombing campaign in support of the government of President Hadi against Shia Houthi rebels and their allies in March last year. Post the strike, Saudi Arabia has assured that its military coalition would scale down operations in Yemen. All 62 people on board a Dubai passenger airline were killed as the plane crashed and caught fire early on Saturday while landing in strong winds in the southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don. The short to medium-range aircraft broke into several pieces and burst into flames. The killed include 44 Russian nationals, 8 Ukrainians, 2 Indians, and 1 person from Uzbekistan. Fly Dubai, founded in 2008, is Dubai's first low-cost airline. European Union leaders concluded a controversial deal with Turkey intended to halt illegal migration inflows to Europe in return for financial and political aid for Ankara. The plan agreed on would essentially outsource Europe's biggest refugee emergency in decades to Turkey. Under it, the EU would pay to send new migrants arriving in Greece who don't qualify for asylum back to Turkey. For every migrant returned, the EU would accept 1 Syrian refugee. In return, the EU will offer up to 6 billion euros in aid and easing of visa restrictions for Turkish citizens and faster EU membership talks.
Let's now bring you up to speed with some other major developments in the world of sports this week on Sports Action.
More bad news for tennis star Maria Sharapova. Sharapova has been suspended as Goodwill Ambassador by the United Nations after the former world #1 admitted she had tested positive for the banned substance meldonium at this year's Australian Open. Sharapova has been losing sponsors ever since, with Nike, Tag Heuer and Porsche already having pulled out. Former FIFA President Sepp Blatter has appealed his 6-year ban from soccer to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Blatter was banned for 8 years in December after being found guilty of unethical conduct relating to a $2 million payment by FIFA in 2011 to UEFA President Michael Platini. The ban was later reduced to 6 years. Soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo will be the first to test Nike's newest offering, the world's first self-lacing sneaker. In a release ahead of the Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, Nike said sneaker automatically tied laces are tied to a comfortable fit the moment the heel touches the sensor. The wearer can make the fit looser or snugger by pressing buttons on the side.
And finally, in deeply conservative Afghanistan, there's a spark of modernity that is showing signs of even catching on, even if it's behind closed doors for now. Young Zumba enthusiasts are on the rise, with the South American dance fitness craze slowly but surely making a mark. Take a look and have a great week.